Good morning. When I was asked to speak here today and share our story, I wasn't worried at all, because from a clinical standpoint, I've told everybody about our lives, so it's very easy to recite the development milestones and the crisis points, medication, dosages, side effects, hospital dates and locations. But then when I started writing it, I realized that our story is much different than just my son's illness. It is how we lived with it. This story became much harder to write. We live outside of Reading, Michigan. My husband says we have a small farm. I say we have a large petting zoo. My husband and I have had the same careers for the past 15 years. My husband has been a youth football, baseball, and basketball coach, but he draws the line firmly at wrestling. He's a Boy Scout master, and we have our own 4-H group. Our family is very involved in our church. We have a 21-year-old daughter that just received her first college degree and has worked at Branch County ISD since graduating from high school. She just got engaged, and we're planning a wedding. Our son is in the 8th grade at Camden. He plays football, basketball, baseball, and did 1 year of wrestling. He shows rabbits and sheep at our local fair. He's a Boy Scout. Last month, he did his first talk at our church. If I stop right there, what a beautiful Christmas card that would be. We could write the letter that goes with it, that kind of fills in the family on everything that's gone on in the last year. But that's a picture that I have never taken and a letter that I would never write. Because behind that picture of the perfect family would be one that was in crisis and complete conflict. Behind the letters of the funny farm stories and sports stories would be stories that would terrify normal people. Eli was incredibly loved, and before he was born, he was so planned. Within a year, I knew something was off. But there's 9 years between my kids, and we just kept being told, it's fine, you're just a first-time mom all over again. Relax, it'll be okay. Years 2 and 3 brought much more of the same. Boys and girls are much different. Just relax, Mom, it'll be okay. 4 and 5 brought the first psychiatrist and the first diagnosis. But it was okay, it's common. Just relax, Mom. It's ironic that the biggest moments in life you don't know that they're happening. They draw a line in your life of a before and after, and you don't know how big they are because you don't know what the after is. Our first big before and after moment came in kindergarten with my son, when we received a panic call that he had gone into a rage in the classroom and destroyed it. By the time I got to the school, the children were terrified, the teacher overwhelmed, and the principal bewildered. I call that our first before and after, because after that, I don't remember ever saying again, everything's just going to be okay. That day started the longest 7 years of our lives. A few of those low points included my son driving around our farm in my car with the windows down and the radios up, doing the pageant wave as we chased him, trying to get him to stop. He stopped when he hit a tree. It was calling the police because one of his rages had started while I was doing the dishes, and he had gotten a hold of one of the knives. I had myself locked in a room, and he was stabbing the door, screaming that he was going to slit my throat and watch me bleed out. He was 7. I remember being so thankful when I heard the sirens, and then I remember hitting my knees when I saw the police officers with their guns drawn. I will forever be thankful to one police officer that not only talked my son down, but talked every police officer there down to avoid a complete tragedy. I remember a panicked call from my daughter. When I got home, she had told Eli that he could only have one pop that day. He had attacked her with a lead line, and some of the welts were deep enough that they were bleeding. It was being called in to my office, where I'm a manager, and had an intervention because they thought I was being domestically abused. And I remember thinking about lying, because somehow having these bruises created by my husband seemed so much more normal than explaining they were from my 10-year-old. It was driving to the hospital to pick Eli up after a short-term hospital stay. And when driving, getting a call from the hospital saying he had gone into a rage and they had sedated him with Geodon, and saying, I can't come and pick him up. I don't have Geodon at my house. How do I keep our family safe? And them telling me if I didn't pick him up, they would have to call social services. It would be abandonment, and I would not only lose Eli, but I'd lose my daughter. The next 7 years flew by because the crisis points didn't allow for sleep or rest or any amount of joy. It was marked with broken glass and broken ribs, by loss of friends and the judgment of family. It was meetings with the school and probation officers and every therapy you could imagine. It was lost jobs and no sleep and dreading the very next moment. It was almost losing your house, because when the choice is between your mortgage and a new therapy, a new doctor, another psychological analysis that might give you an answer, you will choose hope every time. But then came our next before and after moment. A woman from Highfields that I had talked to for years, who I had begged for help and who was unable to help because we made too much money. She called, and there was an SED waiver program that was need dependent, not income dependent. She had told us to set up a meeting with a gentleman in Jackson. I was there at his office in an hour. The difference in that 24 hours, from being alone to having a team. Experts sitting around a table telling us what ideas that they had with more knowledge than I could ever imagine, because there was a pattern in his behavior. I just didn't know it. An in-house therapist that can come into our home, into school, and they carry more weight with psychiatrists than I ever could. It was respite care so that we could get some sleep. It was hope. We decided that no one knew Eli's baseline. He had been on so much medication, and because of the insurance, had been bounced around for so many doctors. So we put him in a long-term care facility. 4 months continued. They were very hard being separated, but there was hope in that separation. When he came home, he was stabilized. The whole difference in his entire effect. He was calm, his muscle tone. He wasn't scared of every minute. However, our home hadn't changed. In many ways, we were victims of domestic assault, and we were living in a house that we were letting him control us. We were scared of him. The same tools that we had used to raise Raylin, they were not going to help us raising Eli. He was in complete control. This isn't healthy for him, because when he would go into his cycles, he needed us to be strong. He needed to be able to look at us to offer him some self-control. And when we were so scared, we couldn't. So Highfields recommended an MST program, and into our lives came Eric Moore. MST is multisystematic therapy. It's a therapist that comes to your house 3 days a week for a few hours at a time. I joked and said it was Nanny 911 on therapy. He didn't just come in and tell us what to do. Instead, he got to know us. He got to know what our values were, what our priorities were. He didn't put limitations on Eli or on our family or tell us what we were doing wrong. Instead, he tried to get us all to our common goals, and he gave us a chance to get to know Eli. For years, not knowing what we were doing, we were trying to drag Eli into our world using the tool sets that we had used previously. Eric showed us how to get into Eli's world, and what a magical place it was when I got to meet my son. I was able to fall in love with him all over again and not be scared. We graduated from MST 6 months ago. We no longer have wraparound. We don't have an in-house therapist. We don't have an SED waiver because we don't need it. There will always be ups and downs, but we know what to do. We know a bad minute isn't a bad life. We know when Eli loses control, how that we step up and support him. We know how to anticipate barriers that in my world, they don't exist, but in Eli's world, those barriers are huge. We know how to anticipate them and work around them. I don't know what the rest of our story will be. I do know that this year I'm taking that Christmas card picture and I'm going to write that letter. And there's going to be no illusions, and there's going to be no facade. I can't begin to understand the intricacies of this financial organization. I do know at the end of the day, the success today will be measured by the hope that you give to clients and to their families. It will be measured by the little victories to those families and by the memories that they get to build and the future that they are given. Today, you get to be an opportunity to be thereafter, and the after can be a really good place. Thank you.